My friends, we're in Bein HaMetzarim, and I thought it would be appropriate if we would dedicate this shir to study a little bit more about the concept of Aveilus.
I don't hear anything.
You don't hear anything. Okay. Why don't you hear it?
It's very clear.
John, it's your problem. John, the problem is in your computer. Because Mitch and Jeff are hearing me. Am I right?
Right.
Okay. So John, you'll have to do a Bloomberg thing. If necessary, I'll send you your children from Efrat to help you. I just got a bracha this morning from his son-in-law in Efrat. Okay. So let's see what we can do. All right, then. Now, what we need is what I call a structure for the laws of Aveilus. And I'm talking now about Aveilus in general, Rahman al-Islam, if you lose one of the close relatives. And if we can create a framework for the laws of Aveilus with regard to one of the close relatives, then we can zoom in, pardon the pun, on Aveilus for the Churban Habayis.
Reverse.
They're two sides of a coin, and we're going to spend, if we're successful today, and I just want to say this, Bruce and I have had discussions about the group at 10 a.m., whether we should have more Gemara Bein, or maybe, topics that are a little bit more general, maybe contemporary halacha, perhaps Parshanut, Tanakh, and so on. So I think this shir is kind of a compromise. It's like Efshel L'Kayim Shnei, we can do both. It's going to be a shir that, if it's successful, is lumdish, very profound, real first-class lumdish. We're going to be learning a sugya moed katan. Don't have to worry if you don't have it in front of you. It's only 2 lines long. And number 2, it's a shir that'll give us a feeling for how we should be preparing during these days if Chas v'Shalom Mashiach doesn't come. Now, the fundamental issue, which we call in the yeshivas a chakira, you see 2 sides of a coin, in regard to Aveilus is the following. We divide up the mitzvahs into 2 parts. This is the most fun. There are many different ways of dividing the mitzvahs, but the most fundamental and the most common is mitzvahs aseh versus mitzvahs lo aseh. And the question that we're going to raise, and it's not a simple question, where do you classify Aveilus? Is Aveilus a mitzvahs aseh or a mitzvahs lo aseh?
One of both.
Well, I don't know of an example, maybe you have an example of something that's both, but if it's both, then there are 2 psukim. Like, for example, Shabbos has a positive area, which is a positive mitzvah, which is called Tishbos. That's one pasuk. There's another pasuk, Lo Tasik Kol Malach. So the Shabbos, you're right, would be an overlap. But in Aveilus, as we'll soon see, there aren't too many psukim about it. In fact, we're going to work very hard to find even one pasuk. But the Rambam has Aveilus in 613. So now we have to figure out, did the Rambam mean to classify it as a mitzvah say or a mitzvah lo say? So I'm going to give you a hint by reading to you a Rambam in the 5th parak of Hilchas Aveilus, and I'm going to assume that you'll all give me the right answer based on this hint. So again, you're going to have to put your thinking caps on, and I see Avi is here, and there's an iPhone who's here. I don't know his last name. I guess iPhone is his first name. And here's what the Rambam says. Achadesvei dvarim asurim ba'avel. There are 11 isurim that apply to an avel. The Eluhem. And the Rambam gives you an enumerated list. I'll just mention a few on the list because we don't have time to go through the entire list. And that's not my purpose. The Rambam has Ne'ilas HaSandal. We're not allowed to wear shoes. The Rambam has Rechitza. We're not allowed to bathe. The Rambam has Tashmish Hamita, no marital relations. So the Rambam goes on and on and on until he has a list of 11 Isurim. And now I'm going to ask you my question. Where do you classify Aveilus? Is it a mitzvah lo taseh or a mitzvah taseh? Clearly,
Lotus.
a lo taseh. It's made up of 11 different Isurim, all of which form a matrix, which is called Aveilus. Aveilus, and I can't overemphasize this point, has no element whatsoever of kum vaseh. Every mitzvah say requires a kum vaseh, requires you to actively do something.
When we learn for somebody, that's not say. When we daven, it's not say.
But that's not Aveilus. When you
how did you say during the Aveilus? Oh, you mean the Aveilus itself?
now again, we're going to talk a lot about Kaddish in Mitzvah Hashem, but you should know, Joe, there's a common mistake about Kaddish. People mistakenly think that Kaddish is an obligation on the Avil and it's part of the mitzvah of Aveilus. That's really a misnomer. Kaddish is a Dover Shebekducha, and we're all obligated in Kaddish. Now, what's the minimum amount of Kaddishim? That's a different issue. You know, we can get into the nitty-gritty details, but we make a mistake.
Yeah.
Really, we give an honor to the Avil to recite Kaddish. But that's a cover that we give to the Avil. In the absence of an Avil, you and me and anybody who's not an Avil will recite Kaddish. Again, what the minimum, I'm not going to get into that.
In your list, is it one mitzvah and then the subcategories?
So that's what we're going to get to in just a minute, Bruce. He's already chopping the shir before I said it.
So when we do Kriya, positive act.
Right, but Kriya is not part of Aveilus. Aveilus begins when? After burial, after Kvura.
But Kriya is associated. If I'm not mistaken, it's the only aspect from the Torah for
Galuda.
if you don't do all these Kriya is like the most important thing.
But Kriya is pre-Aveilus. Misa itself, the death of a relative, obligates a person in Kriya, but that's not part of the matrix of Aveilus. In the matrix of Aveilus, we have 11 different Isurim. So therefore, I submit to you that Aveilus is a mitzvah lo taseh. However, here's the punchline. The Rambam, excellent. That's a good point. Kfiyas hamita sounds like a kum vaseh. Who said that? Avi? It's like a voice from Germany. Avi, how are you? You want to show us your pretty face, or it's impossible? Oh, he's at work. Okay. So for a guy who's at work, he seems to know a lot. Who is this? Is this the iPhone? Oh, that's Avi. Oh, so iPhone moved to the right. They switched sides. Hi, Avi.
Came back from Germany.
You're right. Kfiyas hamita. And since you gave me the right answer, what's the other half of that answer? No, again, we're not looking for a not. We're looking for a two. Kfiyas hamita. What else besides Kfiyas hamita? I'll give you a hint. Atifas harosh. We don't know it today, but in the old days, the Avelim had to wear a special hat. You don't want to wear that hat.
Well, is the fact we don't do
No, it's not just a minhag. It's beginning the Gemara. You know, a minhag is usually something that comes after the Gemara, with rare exceptions. But we'll get back to Kfiyas Hamita and Atifas harosh. Here's the punchline. The Rambam, as you know, whenever he opens up a set of halachas, he begins by telling you how many mitzvos will be included in those halachas. When he opens up Hilchas Avel, and he always is very sensitive to differentiate between mitzvah aseh and mitzvah lo taseh, the Rambam writes mitzvahs aseh lehis avel. There's a positive command to be an Aveilus. And then he goes on and tells you when and whom and how. But yet, the content, the substance of that mitzvah say is 11 isurim. So I'm very perplexed. I need a guide to the Rambam. Well, that's more for Tuesday night. Rabbi Fredman is going to have to help us with that. But be that as it may, where did the Rambam get this from? The Rambam doesn't usually create things from his own mind unless he writes Venira. But here he doesn't write Venira. He clearly classifies explicitly Aveilus as a mitzvah aseh. And I believe we can find the source for this Rambam in a Gemara tucked away on the 14th page, Yudalit Amid Beis, in Masechta Moed Katan. So I'd like to take the time to learn with you this very short sugya in Masechta Moed Katan.
Does that mean you don't have a pasuk from the Torah itself?
Well, again, the Torah never tells you if it's a mitzvah say or mitzvah lo say, but I think the Gemara is going to explicitly classify Aveilus as a mitzvah say. So in my humble opinion, the Rambam derives this conclusion, which is a very confusing conclusion, that there's a mitzvah say l'Isabel. He got it from the Gemara.
I thought they talk about mourning for Miriam, for Aaron, Moshe. It talks about mourning. Must be some comment about it. There must be some pasuk that really relates to it.
Maybe yes, maybe no, but be that as it may, that's not going to tell you whether it's an essay or losas. In other words, what did they do when Miriam died? So again, the close relatives would not wear shoes. They wouldn't drink wine. Excuse me, I'm sorry. They wouldn't bathe themselves, and they would abstain from this, that, and the other. The Gemara asks the following question. Yudalit Amid Beis. I don't have it in front of me, so you'll find it. It should be in the middle of the Om, if I remember. Moed Katan is Masechta Aveilus. Actually, Moed Katan has two parts to it: Masechta Yontif, specifically Chol HaMoed, and Masechta Aveilus. So the Gemara asks the following question: Avel Mahu Linhog Aveluso Berega. We have three regalim, and the Gemara wants to know: should an Avel be Noeg Aveilus on the Rega? I'm going to give you my Pirush Rashi. This is not Rashi, but Burrs on to. We have a conflict here between two commands. One is Aveilus. He buried the dead. The other is V'samachta b'chagecha. Which overrides which? I'll say it this way, this is not a political statement. Which trumps which?
I would have thought that something feel most relevant actually must be very hard. The next day, after burying this,
Right. But the Gemara is not analyzing this from a psychological perspective. The Gemara is trying to weigh mitzvahs. When you have a conflict, a clash between two mitzvahs, then there are various halachic principles, rules, and regulations that govern which mitzvah trumps which. The first person who had this issue was Avraham Avinu, because Chazal say that Hashem was visiting Avraham Avinu, which is a great mitzvah called Kabbalas Pnei Shechina, and all of a sudden he sees three Arabs passing by, and he has a mitzvah of Nas Tzarchim. And
that's the Chagetha. As in the Torah, it's in the Devarim.
Well, we're assuming Aveilus is also Minat Torah. So what do I do if there's a conflict between two mitzvahs in the Torah? So listen to the Gemara's answer. The Gemara says, I'm going to reformulate the Gemara a little bit, that Asi Esei de Rabim Vidochi Esei de Yachid. That in the laws of, what am I looking for, of priority, we give priority to an essay de Rabim, which means that we're all equally obligated in that mitzvah essay, as opposed to an essay de Yachid, which is a mitzvah that's incumbent upon the individual. But in both cases, whether it's Simchas Yontif in the regular, or it's Aveilus, the Gemara calls it a mitzvah aseh. It's not just coincidental. The Rambam understood from this Gemara that Aveilus is a mitzvah aseh. The Gemara says, well, now we have two mitzvah asehs, and we don't know how to prioritize. And the answer is, mitzvah aseh derabim will trump and overcome a mitzvah aseh diyachid. But the Gemara clearly describes Aveilus as a mitzvah aseh. Okay, so far so good. I call this Hakafa Aleph.
I have to take back what I said earlier, because it really is a mitzvah that said. How you accomplish this,
Correct. The Isurim are part and parcel of a mitzvah aseh. The overall constellation is a mitzvah aseh. The only thing is that in order to fulfill that mitzvah aseh, I have to abstain from 11 things. But by doing so and abstaining, which is called in Hebrew himanut, I accomplish a mitzvah aseh. There won't be any bracha on this mitzvah because there's no positive asiyah. I mean, Avi again is talking about kfiyas habitul, but it's a los aseh. So there's no bracha on it in terms of the fall. In other words, in actuality, the way I fulfill this essay is like it's a los essay. But at the end of the day, after, fulfilling the Yud Aleph Yisurim, what I'm left with is a mitzvah essay.
that's what covering mirrors. Is that just custom?
So that's what Kfiyas Hamita is all about, covering mirrors. Today we don't have Kfiyas Hamita, we have instead covering the mirrors. Okay, now here we move on to Hakafa. Now, once again, I need you to put on your thinking caps. When the Gemara, and this is typical of all over Shas, when the Gemara presents a contradiction between two mitzvahs that clash and collide, and the question is prioritizing, what conclusion must you derive? What do you have to learn? This is a methodological point that'll help you through your journey through Shas. Whenever the Gemara has, I'll give you an example. The Gemara wants to know if you have only enough money on Friday night for Shemen Zayit for one candle. Okay, Shemen Zayit is very good here in Efrat, right? So you have enough Shemen Zayit for one candle, and it's Shabbos Chanukah. Should you light a Ner Chanukah or should you light a Ner Shabbos? The Gemara wants to know what priority should we give. And the Gemara goes back and forth. Ner Shabbos is called Shalom Bayis, and Ner Chanukah is called Pirsum Hanes. Which is greater? Which trumps what? Should we tip the scale in favor of Ner Shabbos because Shalom Bayis is greater? Or what do you see from this Gemara? What conclusion must you derive from this Gemara? No. I'm asking the following. Whenever the Gemara looks for priority, what conclusion do you have to derive from the very fact that the Gemara's endeavor is to prioritize? What conclusion must you derive? No cases. Leave out cases. I'm asking for a principle that applies all over Shas. Leave out cases. What mathematical conclusion must you derive? Just be mathematical. I want everyone here to be a mathematician. No. Again, we have rules and regulations as to what trumps one. I'm not asking you for that. I'm not asking you to know intuitively what those rules are. You'd have to be a scholar.
That both are equal. What you're saying is both are equal.
Go one step further off. I'm pushing you to go one step further.
You can only do one thing.
Excellent. Joe has it. It's the Efshel L'Kayim Shneim. Now, I ask you the following question. Why can't I light a candle on Shabbos Chanukah and one candle will suffice for both mitzvahs? Why do I have to ask about priority?
Right.
And the answer is going to be because Aneros Halol Kodesh the Ein Lanu just l'shtamishment. Ner Shabbos is. Do you understand what I'm saying? Let's go back to our Gemara. The Gemara asks, what do I prioritize? Simchas Yontif or Aveilus? What's going to be my question? Again, forget about halfway, Joe. You're on to something hot. Don't lose it. You're with me? I don't want you to lose it. If the Gemara asks what comes first, in other words, what priority do I give to either Aveilus or Simchas Yontif? I'm not interested in the Gemara's answer now. Forget about the specific rules that apply here to determine which priority, which trumps who. But the very fact that the Gemara asks the question of collision, what do I derive?
There's an implication that one will trump over the other one. There's a priority.
No, I'm asking you to go beyond that. Obviously, one will trump the other, because otherwise the halacha will freeze. But what is the underlying premise? That you could only do one. Do you follow me?
I might have already said that the one lagging is
But you can't.
function. I don't know why not. But
Again, it can't be because by definition they're essentially mutually exclusive. The purpose of an Ner Chanukah is not to touch the Ner. The purpose of an Ner Shabbos is to enjoy every benefit from it. Again, we're not learning Ner Chanukah. I just wanted to give you an example of a methodological, mathematical method of understanding the Shas. Because I know you're all interested in knowing all of Shas, are you not?
But an example I might help think about is like you have enough money just to buy a car or one. And that's both serving a similar purpose. One's Makadesh Shabbos.
Okay, good. You have to ask yourself a question whether you can fulfill the mitzvah kiddush on Chal. But again, I'm just asking, today the topic is Aveilus, correct? The Gemara asks what happens when there's a clash between Aveilus and Simchas Yontif. What do I derive from the Gemara's subject, from the Gemara's question? You can only do one. Are you ready to fight me on this one? I'm going to tell you you can do both. And you're going to have to slug me up. Because the Gemara says, Ein simcha ela bebasar v'yayin. How do I fulfill the mitzvah Simchas Yontif? I eat meat and I drink wine. Okay, now let's go over to Aveilus. Is an Avel in the list of 11 prohibitions allowed to drink wine and eat meat? And what's the answer?
no.
He's allowed to. We don't have any Yemenites here. Maybe downstairs we could get a Yemenite here. The Yemenites have a whole say there during the entire Shiva of how many cups of wine the Avel will drink during the Shivas Yimei Aveilus. Don't get confused with Aninus. Aninus is after the death, before the burial. We're now after the burial. After the burial, the Avel drinks wine. If he wants to, I'm not going to force him to drink wine. Is the Avel allowed to eat meat? What's the first Suda that we feed an Avel? I went through it 3 times already in my life. What's it called? No. I'm saying, what's it called? Halachic. No. It's called the Sudas Havra. The Sudas Havra classically is a fleshika meal. For sure.
Is that because it's private? Would it be in public?
Well, then you'd have to do a barbecue and nafnaf. But I'm just saying, you have to trust me on this, Rabbi Osai. An Avel, there is no prohibition that enjoins an Avel neither from drinking wine nor from eating meat. Now, wait a second. An Avel is not allowed to wear shoes. Okay? So what does he wear on his feet? He could be barefoot. Or he could wear what the Americans call sneakers. Or what the Canadians call running shoes. I mean, every country has a different name for it. But it's not made of leather. Can I fulfill the mitzvah of Simchas Yontif as I wear sneakers? For sure. So where is the Efshel L'Kayim Shneir? Why does the Gemara assume, unquestioned premise, that there's an absolute, irreconcilable contradiction between Aveilus and Yontif? It's not irreconcilable. I could be Makai in the midst of Simchas Yontif. I could eat the best steaks and drink the finest wines. Simchas Yontif. I'm already getting in the mood. It's a couple of months. And at the same time, I could be Makayim the 11 Isurim of Aveilus And there's no contradiction whatsoever. I don't understand the Gemara. I don't understand the premise of this Gemara.
I don't see
That was just a joke.
you're saying that you're allowed, an Avel is allowed to have on
Correct.
during the 7 days. right?
7 days.
So why is it a problem having it on that?
No, it's only-
That's exactly my issue. I don't understand the problem, Joe. The Gemara says you have to choose either one or the other. And the Gemara's going to say, well, this is Rabbit, this is Yaakov. Why do I have to choose one or the other? Why can't I have both? Why can't I have my cake and eat it too?
You can have that on Aveilus too.
I'm not sure if we're talking the same language.
So it means
Can an Avel fulfill Simchas Yontif? Can I fulfill Simchas Yontif and observe Aveilus? Can I do both at the same time? Are they reconcilable?
seemingly, yes.
The answer is yes.
Yes, but it's not-
Wait, somebody said something. I don't know. It was from Emek Rephaim or it's from Ephraim.
You can do that while you're-
Did somebody say something? Avi.
They don't need to know.
But that-
Yeah, Avi, you have to raise your voice.
Avi, repeat.
I heard a few words. I heard publicly. I heard Shabbos. I don't know.
Publicly, he can, publicly he has to act in a certain way, and his house he has to act in a certain. Publicly, you don't do Aveilus. That's the minute today. You don't do Aveilus, and if it's, but at home, you're supposed to do things with.
Oh, it's, okay. All right. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly.
Right, Avi, is that what it was?
I don't know exactly how that's relevant exactly to my point.
Because it sounds like a numb to.
But it sounds like
That way you're doing both.
Doing
Doing both.
Publicly, you're being
Makabed
Makayim Yontif, and
And
privately you could be in Aveilus.
So are you supporting my question or answering my question? You're making the question even more sharp, more severe. Okay, that's good. I'm always excited if you want to support my
And
question.
what do you do with the Mishnah that tells you in Moed 19?
Woo!
I learned this. That
Don't underestimate. Don't
that
underestimate.
someone dies 3 days before Yontif, they have to, it's a pilgrimage. They have to go to Yerushalayim, then they don't follow Aveilus.
Right. If you bury the dead before Yontif, then Yontif is Mavatil all of Shiva. If you bury the dead on Yontif, then you postpone Shiva till after. Correct. But all that, Arthur, is based on this premise that the Gemara lays down, that it's one or the other. You can't have both. So if you bury before Yontif, then Yontif comes along and there's no Aveilus. If you bury on Yontif, then Simchas Yontif will trump Aveilus. It's all part of the same package deal. But why is it irreconcilable?
The person is Aveilus.
Okay, so we'll work that out. But I'm asking you a much more fundamental question. You're saying, well, it may impact on the public. Forget about all that. That's nice. But that's not the point. The point here is, why does the Gemara lay down this premise, unquestioned, that it's Efshalakayim Shtem, that there's no way you can have both? So again, you want to say, okay, in private, I can do both. I'm going to eat a fleishik meal. I'm going to drink my, Mishubach Yahin, and I will wear my sneakers, right? Okay, so that's good enough for me. Because you have a double mitzvah. You have a mitzvah Simchas Yontif, you're eating meat and drinking wine, and you have the mitzvah of Aveilus. What's the mitzvah of Aveilus? That I don't wear my shoes. But you have to admit, that's an overlap of those two mitzvahs. The Gemara doesn't know of an overlap. The Gemara is going to say it's either or. One is going to have to give way to the other. We'll have to learn the laws of priorities, which is called Dinei Kedima. And we're going to give Kedima to Simchas. But where's the contradiction? So, Rabbosai, to answer this question, which is a very profound question, I am going to take a step backwards and talk to you about the mitzvahs like Tefillah and Kriyat Shema and Shofar, and then we'll get to Simcha and Aveilus. Let's begin with Tefillah. The source for the mitzvah of Tefillah, according to the Rambam, and he's basing himself on the Sifri, V'avartem es Hashem Elokechem b'chol levavchem. And the Sifri comments, Ezi Avoda, says Vavadatim, it says in the Pasuk. And then it says, B'chol Avavchem, Ezi Avoda Shebelev Zui Tefillah. My Rebbe Rav Soloveitchik used to teach us that every mitzvah can be divided into two parts. We don't realize this. He said every mitzvah has what's called a Maisa mitzvah and a Kiyuma mitzvah. So, for example, I have to eat a Kazayas matzah on the night of Pesach. Once I do so, I obtain the Kiyuma mitzvah. The Kiyuma mitzvah means the fulfillment of the mitzvah. There is no separation whatsoever between the Maisa mitzvah and the Kiyuma mitzvah. Says Rav Soloveitchik, that's true. Again, he didn't say it this way. That's true for 98% of the mitzvahs. But there are 2% of the mitzvahs where there's an exception. And the Maisa mitzvah and the Kiyuma mitzvah are two separate entities. Tefillah, for example. What's the Maisa mitzvah of Tefillah? Speech, right? Recitation. Let's say Chazal established that you recite the Shemona Esrei 3 times a day. That's not the Kiyuma mitzvah. Because the Torah commands you what? Not to recite the Tefillah, but Avoda Shebelev. So imagine the case, and hopefully none of us fit into this description, that we recite the Tefillahs. I don't want to tell you what a Met fan I am, but he's thinking about the soccer games. Or he's preparing, who remembers the SATs, again, if you're American, right? He's freaked out because tomorrow in his senior year, this is going to determine what college he gets into and so forth and so on. Tomorrow I have an interview for a job. He can't concentrate on his davening. He did the Maisa mitzvah. Would he obtain the Kiyuma mitzvah? His mind is completely disconnected to tefillah. Completely. Sorry, buddy. A Maisa mitzvah in that case, it's not like matzah, is not enough. You need the Kiyuma mitzvah. And basically, the deeper lumdus here is that on certain very, very exceptional cases, the Maisa mitzvah is really a means to an end. The means is absolutely critical. And you're not allowed to find another way of getting to that end because the halacha requires the Maisa mitzvah. But the Maisa mitzvah is not sufficient.
So,
it's necessary, but not sufficient.
So Aveilus, according to the Rambam, is to heal the person who's mourning.
Whatever it is, but he has to be in an inner state of Aveilus. And the same thing applies to Simcha. Imagine the case of a person who eats the finest steaks straight off the Eish, off the barbecue, and he drinks the finest wines on Yom Tov. The man, I hate to say this word because it bothers me, but the man is depressed. Chas v'shalom. You know, in Breslov Chasidus, the worst thing in the world is depression. Atzmut. There's nothing worse than that. Mitzvah Gedol Elias, v'simcha tamid, right? So taught Rabbi Nachman. Would you say that he obtained the mitzvah? He ate the best meat, drank the best wine, but he's down in the dumps. I'll give you another example. Again, this is also scary to think about. The man lost a close relative, Rahman al-Islam. He's sitting Shiva. He's makpid kichut hasayra on every last halacha. But he's happy. Now, I'm not going to tell he's happy because his father died and left him a couple of $1 million. I'm not going to say. But again, he's happy because he had a crashing, his stock just tripled. I don't know. Whatever reason he's happy, he gets a good piece of news. That's already a high level, not high matrega. Would you say that this man fulfilled the mitzvah of Aveilus simply because he was absolutely meticulously careful about not violating any of the 11 Isurim when the man is dancing for joy?
What more can someone do than Isa and hope for the best?
So the Kiyuma mitzvah is Aveilus. What is Aveilus? How is it antithetical to Simcha? Whenever you see the word Simcha in the Torah, it's always connected with two other words. V'samachtem lifnei Hashem. Simcha is when I feel the close embrace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Aveilus is just the opposite. Aveilus is Richuk. I don't know where God is. I know He's there. I believe. Kel emunah ve'en over. The other will declare his faith. He knows it's part of a divine plan. Can he figure it out? Is it logical? Is it catastrophic? But it's God's will. And at that moment, which is called Midas Hadin, God has said, we're going to have a little bit of a long distance relationship. That feeling, belief of Richuk Hashem, which is basically in order to bring a person back closer to Hashem. The ultimate goal is that when I feel I'm missing something, and you and I know the most difficult part of Aveilus is when you feel missing something.
Why should that translate my relationship with Hashem? I lost a relative. I missed that person. I'm still as close to God as I was before.
Like God has abandoned. I don't want to use that term because maybe you'll misunderstand what I mean, but I miss that closeness.
When your 100 mother passed away, you might say.
You know what? I'll tell you, Bruce, this is interesting, and you're more of a psychologist than I am, but what I find is that the older a person is when they die, the greater, the more intense is the Aveilus. I know it sounds like counterintuitive because, my gosh, I remember I used to be a Ben Bias, had a family in Canada. I lived in Canada for 2 years. And the Mrs. host introduced me to her mother. Her mother was 104. I said, this can't be. I mean, I was brought up in good old Brooklyn, New York. I mean, there was no one 104 years. I don't know, Joe, do you remember anyone? I always came to the conclusion that the weather is so difficult in Canada. It's like the survival of the fittest, Anyway, she's climbing up the stairs on Shabbos morning to wake up her daughter for davening. And she's having a little trouble getting up the steps. So she says, my husband, she said in a Polish accent, she said, my husband used to say that if you live a long life, you pay the price. And I'm paying the price. Never. She's 104 climbing the steps to wake up her. And people have told me, and I've heard it from many people, that their Aveilus for an older parent is even more intense than for a younger. I mean, it's counterintuitive. So I don't know.
Person you find the people who sometimes that parent lives with them, dealing with them every day,
Right.
Sunday life.
So that sense of emptiness, from a halachic perspective, should be translated into Richuk me'Hashem, Midas Hadin. Sometimes God is close. Sometimes Kaviyachli plays hide and seek. So when he's close, if I can use a phrase from my good old childhood days, Simon and Garfunkel, feeling groovy. Do you remember that? How to make the morning last, feeling groovy. So that's simcha, when you feel groovy, because you feel uplifted and inspired. Hashem is close. I don't have to look in every corner, with a feather and a candle to find Hashem. But in the case of Aveilus, I feel just the opposite. Where is God? So the stira, the contradiction between simcha on Yontif and Aveilus, and the answer to the question why they're mutually exclusive is not in the Maisa mitzvah. In the Maisa mitzvah, they are reconcilable. You can eat meat, drink wine, and be an Avel. You can wear sneakers and be kind of it's the Simchas Yontif. Where is the contradiction? It's the Kiyum Shebelev. Just like in Tefillah, we said there's a Kiyum Shebelev, which is critical. Without the Kiyum Shebelev, you miss the point. The Maisa mitzvah doesn't register up in Shemayim. So too with regard to Aveilus, the Kiyum Shebelev is Aveilus, and with regard to Simcha of Yontif, the Kiyum Shebelev of Simcha, and Simcha and Aveilus believe are mutually exclusive.
You also related all the same things to Shabbos. Shabbos, you're not, and even more.
Shabbos doesn't have Simcha. So it's a little bit more complicated. The Gemara never raises the question of a stira. Again, with regard to Shabbos, as Avi mentioned before, you have problems of publicly praving Aveilus because then maybe you'll be pogea in the mood of Shabbos for the community, blah, blah, blah. But Shabbos is not a mitzvah of simcha. Now, why? I don't know. Okay, Hasidim have upgraded Shabbos to a mitzvah of simcha. Yismechu malchuscha, The Litvakas don't say it, but whatever it is. But let's focus on Yontif. Do you agree with me that on Yontif, the Torah commands us, V'samachta b'chagecha? Can a person be an Avel, fulfill the mitzvah saseh of Aveilus? Because what does it mean that Aveilus is a mitzvah saseh? That was our first question today. And the answer is that we have a whole constellation of 11 Isurim, but they're all Isurim that are meant to bring me and guide me to achieve the ultimate agenda, the ultimate goal, which is the mitzvah saseh of Aveilus. What is the mitzvah saseh of Aveilus? It's Aveilus shebalev. And if I fulfill all 11 Isurei Avel, it's meant to bring me to a state of Aveilus shebalev. And that state of being, that inner experience, that Kiyum shebalev is antithetical to the Kiyum shebalev of Simcha. So again, the Gemara's premise here that you can't have both simultaneously, be an Avel and be Makayim of Simcha, is not in the level, in the realm of Maisa Mitzvah. In the realm of Maisa Mitzvah, I can do both. But I wouldn't be able to Makayim both mitzvahs because the Kiyum in both Aveilus and in Simcha is a Kiyum Shebalev. And those two Kiyumim Shebalev are mutually exclusive.
This reason I need to teach. When you see a lot of people visiting someone in Shiva, it sort of cheers them up. They're talking about fond memories. It's sort of like the opposite, where they should be epic.
Well, I would say the following: memories, what we call retrospection, is the key to Aveilus, because Aveilus is about recognizing the loss. Just to tell them about the latest scores in the soccer game, that's not Nicham Avelim. Nicham Avelim means, I'll tell you what I think is the spitz, the epitome, the apex of Nicham Avelim is, what can you tell me about your mother that I can imitate her midah? Can you isolate one thing that I can emulate your mother? That's a kiyum of Nicham Avelim, because the point is to try to evaluate the loss. That's why there's a mitzvah of an Avel of Hesped. Hesped, maybe the first 3 days is even more intense, and then even the last 4 days. Hesped means, God, look what you've taken from me. Maybe I didn't appreciate her when she was alive, but now she's gone. And there aren't enough words to evaluate that loss. That's Richuk, that's Midas Adin. That's what Aveilus is all about. Simcha is a whole other experience. Simcha means I enter into the Beis HaMikdash, and I feel God's presence wherever I am. Moloch al Aretz Kvodo. That's the greatest Simcha. Hashem is there. I can feel Hashem in front of me. So when I started this year, I told you that sometimes you talk about topics that seem to be superficial and they're so profound. They are so challenging. And now I'm ready for Hakafah Gimel if we still have time. I have no idea what time it is. Yeah, how are we doing on the clock? Okay, we have another 10 minutes? Okay, Hakafah Gimel. The Gemara goes on in Moed Katan to raise another issue. Menuda, ma'u linog niduso berega. What's a menuda? Person in nidui. Again, loosely translated, a terrible translation called excommunication. And we give him a whammy. And during that time that he's a menuda, stam menuda is 30 days, sometimes it's longer, he has to observe Aveilus, all 11 Isur, identical to an Av. And the Gemara wants to know now, would there be a conflict between a menuda and Yontif? Which trumps which? And the Gemara goes on to analyze this question. Says the Ritva, one of the great Rishonim in Spain, we just finished coming to the conclusion that Aveilus loses out to Simcha Shevalei, to the mitzvah of Simchas Yontif. Why is the Gemara going through this again? Says the Ritva, because menuda is fundamentally different than an Avel, even though in the outer observance it's identical to Aveilus, the same exact 11 Isurim apply to a menuda. Says the Ritva, but it's fundamentally different. In the case of Aveilus, the mitzvah is lisabel. to achieve Aveilus. In the case of Menuda, there's no mitzvah of Aveilus. And therefore, the Gemara raises the possibility that there's no contradiction. Let him be noig his miduyim, and he'll wear sneakers instead of shoes during the Yontif. But what do you see from the Ritva? How did the Ritva understand nidu? It's purely what? Again, we said we're dividing up the mitzvahs into two, right? We have mitzvah say and mitzvah losa. So we came to the conclusion that despite the fact that Aveilus is made up of 11 isurim, it's a mitzvah say because the kiyum is a kiyum shebalev. Comes along the Ritva and says menuda is what? Maisa mitzvah without a kiyum shebalev. We are not asking the menuda to achieve any state of being. We are imposing upon him 11 different prohibitions, but they're external. Do you know what I mean by external? They're outside of the inner personality of the lave. There's no kiyum shebalev in menuda. Hence, says the Ritva, now the Gemara thinks I can reconcile nidui with Yontif with simplicity. Is that brilliant? I get chills from this. It's so exciting. And now we get to Akaf Adam. And this is, Joe, what you were touching on a little bit before, that Varm Chibit sin, that Aveilus in pride. The Ramban wants to know the following. It's Yontif, it's Regel, Chol Hamoed, let's say, and they buried the dead. One of your close friends, Rachmana litzlan. And the law is that you begin Aveilus when? After Yontif. Whole sugi about Yontif Sheni, I'm not going to get into it. So the Ramban says, what happens during those days of Yontif? I would have said, Rabbeinu Nach, I would have said to him, we're postponing Aveilus until after Yontif. What kind of question is that? There should be no expression. There should be no application or implementation of Aveilus during the Regel. We have 7 days of Aveilus after Yontif. No. Says the Ramban that even during the Regel, he must observe Aveilus B'tzino, which means Tashmish Hamita. He's not allowed to have intimacy with his wife during those days. When I saw this Ramban, which is published, by the way, in Torah Sa'adam, if you have, you'll see it inside. It's Moser of Cook. He has 2 volumes called Kisvei Ramban. So there's a section there the Ramban wrote. He authored a section called Torah Sa'adam, which is all about Aveilus. And the Ramban says that during the 7 days of Yontif, he has to be noeg and isur of Tashmish Hamid. Question whether Ramban also would prohibit rechitza if he washed, whatever. But basically, Tashmish.
The only thing that it's about?
Again, rechitza is a little bit of a question, but basically it means Tashmish Hamid. There's an equation here, an identity. These 2 terms are synonymous. Varm Shebitzina and Tashmish Hamid. They're basically synonymous terms. I asked myself the following question: is the Ramban completely blowing me out of the water? Everything I told you for the last 40 minutes or whatever it is completely incorrect. We just finished saying that there's an absolute collision between Aveilus and Simchas Yontif. We just finished saying that all 11 Isurim all amount to a kiyum of Aveilus Shebalev, and there's no kiyum of Aveilus Shebalev during Yontif because the mitzvah is a kiyum of Simcha Shebalev. Why then would the Ramban postulate, and by the way, it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch Halacha, that there's an Isur Avil during Yontif? What do you mean? My mitzvah is what? Simcha. There's no mitzvah of Aveilus. And the Torah says Tashmish Hamid is one of the 11 Isurim. Yeah, but that's only to achieve Aveilus. What conclusion do I derive from this Ramban? Whether I like it or not. Just mathematical.
Separating the most from the kiyum.
He's saying that there's a Maisa Aveilus without a Kiyum Aveilus. Oh my God. You know what that means? In brisket terms, it's called Tzvei Dinim. The Ramban is saying there are 2 dimensions to Aveilus. One dimension to Aveilus is Kiyum Shebalev, meaning abstain from X, Y, and Z in order to achieve a Kiyum Shebalev. And then there's another dimension of Aveilus, like we saw in Menuda. What do we see from Menuda? That there's a Maisa Mitzvah without a Kiyum Shebalev. That there's an Isur Avel minus a Kiyum Shebalev. My Kiyum Shebalev is Simcha, but yet I have an Isur. This makes life very complicated. It's no longer simple the way we saw it.
Well, why don't I separate,
Gleich and smooth. It's more complicated than meets the eye.
why don't I separate the life in really in every minute? Let's say davening. I'm not in the mood for whatever reason. Oh, the mitzvah to do the Meiser daven. My best, and if I don't achieve the key, I didn't, but I did the Meiser, so.
Are you aware of the fact that you're standing in front of the Almighty? If you're not aware of it, and trust me, minimal bottom level,
Can I say I'm-
my mind is on the moon.
Well,
I am not thinking about Hashem. You tap me on the shoulder, and I'm saying, the words al tzaddikim hasidim, and all of a sudden,
But you are, because you're doing it because it's a commandment, because of Hashem. You're saying, you know what, I'm not in the mood now. I'm not in the mood. I got some there are worse things than the way some things you mentioned. I just can't daven now. I have to daven because that's part of what I have.
so Joe, that's a machlokes. If you're interested, again, it's another shir between the Chazon Ish and Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim believes that you could stand in tefillah and have absolutely zero awareness that you're standing in front of Hashem. And the Chazon Ish disagrees. The Chazon Ish calls it Yediyah Keha.
If I can.
And the best translation I could give to Yediyah Keha is latent awareness. There's a latent awareness that I'm standing in front of God. So you're a Chazon Ishnik.
It's like saying Kriyat Shema after the Zman. You're gonna get the credit. for
Kikari Baton.
saying Kriyat Shema, but not by Zman. No. So you're doing something, and because you're doing whatever the reason was, not because you couldn't do it. Okay.
Right.
Crazy. You did it with the same thing with Shema and everything.
But Rabosai, are you willing to grant me the following conclusion? No, you have to be honest, man. That according to the Ramban, Aveilus is not so simple. It's not. It's complex. There are we came to the conclusion that Aveilus and Simcha, Aveilus is Aveilus Shebelev, Simcha is Simcha Shebelev. They're irreconcilable. They're mutually exclusive. The Ramban is saying that there's an element of Aveilus which is not connected to Simcha. I'm sorry, which is not connected to the Lev.
It's hard to, if you survey people, do they really feel Aveilus, although we're doing certain things? I'm not
So what
sure.
I'm going to tell you, Bruce, if you wait till I get to the punchline, but I'm running out of time, I'll just, I shouldn't do this, and I hate to do this because I hate to fast forward all my proofs. I have 3 proofs to draw the following conclusion. That Aveilus for Churban, even according to the Ramban, exhausts itself in Kiyum Shebelev. In Aveilus Chadasha, never, for one of his close relatives, Lo Aleinu, there may be an element, according to the Ramban, of Iser Aveilus without a Kiyum Shebelev. But there's no such parallel in Aveilus for Churban. It's purely 100% Kiyum Shebelev. Then that might scare you, but I believe that this is true. I'm going to give you one example because we don't have time. I'll give you one example. The Ramban quotes an opinion that an Avel during his 7 days of Aveilus is not allowed to learn any Torah whatsoever, including Yirmiyah, Dvar Maram should be Yirmiyah, including Eicha, including the Agaditas about the Churban, nothing. There is no such parallel sheet in the poskim with regard to Tisha B'Av, which means that it's unanimously agreed that on Tisha B'Av you're allowed to learn, maybe even obligated to learn, Eicha, Dvar Maram should be Yirmiyah, Kinos, and the Agadita Gittin called Hanizak. What's the difference? I'll tell you what the difference is. Because in Aveilus, for a relative, there are 2 dimensions. There is Kiyum Shebelev, and here we're going to say Pikudi Hashem Yisharim Misamche Lev, so you're not going to study Simcha, but there's another element in Aveilus. And what is that? Just simply an Iser Avel. You're an Avel, you're enjoined from learning Torah. I don't care what Torah it is. The word arises from a pasuk in Yechezkel, Henek Dam. But when it comes to Aveilus for Churban, there is no such thing as a Maisa as an external action. It's all Aveilus Belev. And I'll conclude by saying that the Gemara Bava Kama talks about a fellow who showed up. His name was I think I forgot his name right now. The Gemara Bava Kama. And the Gemara says he wore black from head to toe. Even his shoelaces were black. And the Gemara says that they suspected him of Yuara. Yuara means when you try to show, oh, I'm more pious than the next one. The Jews would wear white shoelaces or white on the. He wore total black. I just want to, if you give me a second, I'll just tell you his name. Just my own edification. Eliezer Zeira. Okay, Eliezer Zeira, it's a Gemara Bava Kama Daf Nun Tes Amud Beis. So what did they do? They checked him out, and they found out that he was totally sincere. He was genuine. He was, as Coca-Cola would say, the real thing. There was no fake over. He wasn't trying to show Prava Sidkus, that I'm more pious than you are. He was totally involved in Aveilus over the Churban Abayis to such an extent that he couldn't get himself to wear anything that was white. And they let him go by. What you see from that, Rabos, is that there are different levels and gradations. It's very subjective. What for you is Aveilus is not enough for me, or what for me is not enough for you. Everybody has their level of Aveilus. The Rambam writes that there were those Chachamim who on Tisha B'Av or on Erev Tisha B'Av, they would already sit down next to a hot stove on the floor, and it would break out in tears. The Rambam describes different levels of Aveilus. But what's common to all of us is that each and every one of us has to achieve Kol Echad Lefi Dargaso Aveilus Shebelev. Going through the external motions, you can have a person on Tisha B'Av who sits on the floor, on a low bench. They don't eat, they don't drink, they observe the laws of Tisha B'Av. Yeah, they watch movies. Great. Tisha B'Av is a day off. That's not a kiyum Shebelev. Aveilus Chadasha, the new Aveilus for Rachman Yeluza, that might have a dimension of a Maisa mitzvah without a kiyum Aveilus Shebelev. But when it comes to, again, I have a lot of rise for this, we need another half hour, but to prove that in Aveilus for Churban, there's no such thing as going beyond the bounds of Kiyum Shebelev. Everything is Kiyum Shebelev. And it's beautiful how the halacha starts with Shivasa B'Tammuz and gradually intensifies the Aveilus, because the entire structure of Aveilus for Churban Abayis, for episodes in Jewish history that took place 2,000 years ago, is to bring us into the state of Aveilus Shebelev, to grow and intensify those feelings until we finally reach Tisha B'Av, which is the apex. So my blessing at the end of the Shir, Yiratzon, we should be Zocher, not to Aveilus Chadosh, and not to Aveilus Yishana, but rather to Bini Beis HaMikdash, but that we put some effort into. It takes work to achieve what these days are about, Aveilus Shebelev. And Gemara tells us, Kol Misha Mis'abel Al Yerushalayim, Zocher V'roa V'binyana, we should all be Zocher to see the binyan of Yerushalayim until Yerushalayim will extend into Efrat and beyond Efrat. Ken Yiratzon. Thank you so much.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
In Sota Chet Amidal, we talk about how you don't